If you have a second, take the Chumash, and if you'll open to the table of contents. Before we get to the Parsha table of contents, there are people who read the Bible because they find in the Bible simple truth. They find in the Bible relief from complexity. They find in the Bible the simple word of God. And I suppose we could preach that way, but I don't find that in the Bible. I think the Bible is one of the few books in the world that really understands the complexity of human existence and is not afraid of it. I think the Bible is one of the few books in world literature that has a deep understanding of the nuance of human existence. And this week's Torah portion is the Torah portion if you like complication. So in other words, if you're voting for certain candidates, close the book. You're going to find this very frustrating. Because this is a book about careful thought, reflection, complication, nuance, and a respect for the intricacies, the Baroque intricacies of being a human being. Take a look with me first at the table of contents. You'll see right where we are. Right? Everyone, I don't know. It's no pay. It's XI. Does that help you? 11, but in Roman numerals. XI. It says contents at the top. It's hard to miss. Everybody got it? Now the Torah is the Torah. When the Torah was divided into weekly Torah portions, we're not exactly sure. There were two traditions. The Palestinian tradition divided the Torah into 154 sidras, and the Babylonian, that was the Palestinian, the Jerusalem tradition. The Babylonian tradition was 54 parshiot, which is the one that we use, a weekly Torah portion. But it was divided well before the Talmud. This is an ancient division. So take a look with me where it says Shemot on the bottom right-hand corner, Exodus. You see that? Here's the book of Shemot. Now look at the way the book of Shemot is laid out. It's perfect. It is a perfect story. If Genesis is the story of God's cosmos, and God's cosmos says God is Tov Me'od, is very good, Shemot shows you the human cosmos, and the human cosmos is also perfect. It's a perfect balance. There are 4 Torah portions that tell the story of our exodus from Egypt. We become slaves in chapter 1. And we spend 4 Torah portions, Shemot, Va'era, Bo, and Bishalach, discussing, meditating on the miracle of redemption, of a God of history, a God who stands with the weak and the disenfranchised to lead them out of Egypt and bring them to freedom. 4 Torah portions. 2 Torah portions, Yitro and Mishpatim, talk about the event at Mount Sinai, the giving of law, the giving of ethics, the revelation of God at Mount Sinai. And then 4 Torah portions, Truma Tetzaveh Vayakel Pekude, tell the story of the building of the Mishkan, where we create an institution, the very first Jewish institution, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the place of meeting God, God's residence in the world. Truma Tetzaveh gives us the blueprints for how God wants it built. Vayakel Pekude tells us that Moses, aided by Betzalel and Hur, built it perfectly. So now God has a residence in the world. The God who we met on Mount Sinai, the God who liberated us from Egypt, will accompany us on the journeys of our history. God will be with us, and we will access God, and we will be able to commune with God, and the event of Sinai will go on. The 4 Torah portions at the beginning tell the remarkable story of how God orchestrates history to bring us to freedom. The 4 Torah portions at the end tell us remarkably how Moses and Aaron orchestrate the building of this institution, so the institution's perfect. So now we have a perfect balance. A perfect balance. 10 Torah portions. 4 tell us the story of God's relationship to history. 2 give us the ethics to live a godly life. 4 tell us the creation of the residence of God in the world. 4, 2, 4, 10, the perfect number. Perfect. See, perfect. 10, perfect. The whole world is perfect. Everything is perfect. It's a perfectly balanced story, a perfectly balanced world. History, like nature, is perfectly balanced. Wait a minute. Says you, there's an 11th portion. No, there can't be an 11th portion. 10. 10's perfect. 4, 2, 4. Perfect. How can there be an 11? What a crummy number is 11? Who has 11 fingers? 11. 11's a prime number. You can't divide it. 11 you can't put in a box. 11 you don't know what to... 11? This is 11. Who put an 11th portion in there? And look where they put it. Right between Truma Tetzaveh and Vayakhel Pekudei. Truma Tetzaveh, Vayakhel Pekudei are mirror images of each other. Literally, word for word, the same story. In the Truma Tetzaveh, God says, do this, do this, do this, do this. Vayakhel Pekudei, Moshe did it, Moshe did it, Moshe did it, Moshe did it. It's perfect. Who put a Torah portion in the middle? Why would you jam in an 11th Torah portion? That's the point. We're going to hear two voices here. You're going to hear this voice that says, we're going to make the world perfect. We're going to make the world over in God's image. And then you're going to hear this other voice, which says, you know, it would be nice if you could. I respect your idealism. I respect your vision. I respect your passion. I respect your aspiration. But that's not the human reality out of which you build a world. And if you don't know the human reality out of which you build a world, you will be dangerous. So let me tell you what you're dealing with here. Let's be realistic. And there's a realist voice and an idealist voice. And the realist voice got hold of the Torah and slammed Tissa into the middle of the Torah portion. And it's right in the middle. It's just a mess where they put it. Now, it doesn't belong there, by the way. It doesn't belong there. I'll show you why it doesn't belong there. Turn with me to the beginning of chapter 32, which is on page 529. Turn with me to page 529, right? We got some seats in here if y'all want to come in and sit down. Y'all? Wow, South Carolina's voting today, so it's y'all. In honor of South Carolina. The 6 Democrats in the whole state are voting today, so... Okay. I lived in Texas. Nina and I registered in our precinct in Dallas, in North Dallas, and we knew that our votes counted because in the paper in the morning they listed how many Republicans voted and how many Democrats, and we saw our 3 and we knew, there you go, you know. It was me, Nina, and Mrs. Ottstad who lived across the street. That was it. You know, 3,200 Republicans and 3 lunatic Democrats, right? So they used to come and interview us about, like, how's the trend looking, you know? So my wife's in the kitchen and Mrs. Ottstad's across the street. You can ask her, you know. All right, look. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain. Now, wait a minute. Don't turn the page. The mountain? When did he go up to the mountain? I'll show you. Put a finger here. Turn back to page 479. 479. Way back. Way back in Mishpatim. Way back in Mishpatim, right? 479, verse 12. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait here, and I'll give you stone tablets with the teachings of the commandments which I've inscribed. And Moses told us, wait here, I'll be right back. And when Moses ascended the mountain, verse 15, turn the page. The cloud covered the mountain, and the presence of the Lord abode on the Mount Sinai, and it hid it for 6 days. And the 7th day he called Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of the Lord appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud, ascended the mountain, and remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So 2 things. The story in chapter 32 is the next piece of the story in chapter 24. Which means this is not chronological. Even the Torah tells you it's not chronological. This happened at Mount Sinai. All this stuff in between, this is stuff that was stuck in here by an editor because he wanted to make a point. What point he wanted to make, we'll learn in just a minute. And you now know why the people were worried that Moses isn't coming back. When they saw Moses go up the mountain, what'd they see? Cloud and fire and the presence of God and this 80-year-old fellow climbing this rocky mountain. Would you trust that he's coming back? Probably. What?
Yeah.
Well, you would. Because you're a man of faith. Yeah, but they didn't know that. You know that. They didn't know that. Well, you knew it then, but you were one of 602,000, right? You were sitting you were in the back, Elman. They put all the Reform Jews in the back, you see. Eating treif, right. Right. That's because the guys in the front didn't want to stand next to women, so they threw them, all right. You see, there's a lady suing El Al. Did you see that? It's a good story. I hope she wins a million zillion. She was sitting in a flight, and they told her she had to change her seat because there was a Haredi guy who wouldn't sit next to her. Right, so she did. She was nice about it. She didn't want to delay the flight, so she moved. And then she sued them for a billion zillion. This lady's going to own the airline when we're done. This is fine by me. All right, now, so you see what goes on here? This story was put here for a reason. The question I'm going to ask you when we finish is, why is this story here, not where it belongs? That's one of the questions. All right, come with me to chapter 32. Let's go. Page 529. When the people saw that Moses was, where are we now? Down on the bottom of the mountain. Pay attention to location. Up, down is one of the dialogues of the story. Up, down. When the people saw, where are we? Moses on the top of the mountain, communing with God. In the movies, they have a way to. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the mountain, what's going on at the bottom of the mountain? Meanwhile, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron. This phrase in Hebrew is Al Aharon. So there's a ton of midrash that says, what does Al Aharon mean? Why is it on Aaron? Was he complicit? Was he not complicit? Did they force him? All kinds of questions. And they said to him, listen carefully, come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man, Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. Listen to the words again. Make us a god. Why? Because that man, Moses, who brought us out of Egypt, he's gone. Who brought them out of Egypt? Moses. In their minds? Moses. So what kind of people are these? What are they doing? They don't think of God took them out of Egypt. God's invisible. You can't see God. What are they doing? They are visible. They are they're looking for something visible. They can only believe in what they see. They're living in an Egyptian culture which is highly iconic. Everything's visible. So who brought us out of Egypt? Yeah, talk about your God. But it's Moses. He's the one. So what have they made of Moses? No, not a scapegoat. They made him a god. He was the God who took him out. Make us a God, because the God who took us out of Egypt is gone. He climbed up the mountain and disappeared.
Nobody went to rescue him.
No one went to rescue him because they're too afraid that if you go up, you're going to die too. And the mountain's quaking and the mountain's on fire. But what's more important is that they are going to believe in what they see. They're going to believe in what they see. They're going to deify him and mythologize him, make him an icon, make him a fetish, because when you're scared, you hold on to something. Rabbi Winnicott once said that children have a thing called transitional objects, right? That's why the kid holds on to his baby blanket, right? You have the baby blanket, and when the kid turns 3, he doesn't let go of the baby blanket. And when he goes to college, he takes the baby blanket with him because it reminds him of mommy and daddy. Right? You hold on to a transitional object because you're afraid, and this is what tells you who you are as you go through the transitions of your life. Moses becomes their transitional object. And he's gone. So we need another God. Make us a God. Make us a God. So what does Aaron do? Now, there's many voices in the tradition about Aaron. There are some voices which blame him. Why would Aaron do this? They blame him because Moses is gone. He wants to be leader, right? How long can you play second fiddle to your baby brother? Let me be the leader. I can do this. And there are other voices that see into the subtleties of the text his efforts to impede them, to slow them down, to wait until Moses comes, right? Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. So there's 2 things you learn from that verse. Number 1, that Jewish boys wore earrings then too. So if your son or grandson or husband wants to wear an earring, it's nicht gefährlich, right? And then, of course, there's a Ray Rye comment on this, which says he told him that because he never thought Jewish women would part from their jewelry. You know, he said, give me your jewelry. He said, religion, we'll take jewelry. Forget it. We don't need God, we have jewelry. Right? And for the first time and the last time in Jewish history, they did it. All the people took off the gold rings. That's why you need to hold on to your gold, right? Because this is what happens when you give it away. They took off the gold rings of the ears and they brought him to Aaron, and he took it from him and he cast it in a mold and he made a molten calf. He melted the gold, and then you hammer it into sheets and you put it over something made out of wood and you make a golden calf. Okay? Yes.
Why did the slaves of Egypt
Because before they left, what did they do? They borrowed everything they could from their neighbors. Every Jewish woman went next door and said, can I borrow those gold earrings? And because they had just seen 10 plagues, the Egyptians were mighty willing to lend them that. Right? And so they had all this gold, and they take all the gold that they borrowed from the Egyptians and they turned it into something, to an idol. Right? Okay, right. Watch what happens. Egyptian gold, right. Now, listen to the next two speeches. Listen very carefully to the next two speeches. He took that from them, he cast it and made it a golden calf. And the people exclaimed, listen to what the people say, and listen to what Aaron says. The people said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So they're pointing to the calf, and they say, this is your God. Now listen to what Aaron says. Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and he announced, tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord. Now what's Aaron thinking? What's Aaron thinking? Tomorrow is a festival of God. So what is the calf to Aaron? No, it is something. What is it? The calf to Aaron is a worship place. Well, not yet. It's not yet a distraction. It's a symbol. Look. It's a symbol of God's presence in their midst. But God is God. Right? One of the theories is that the calf was the footstool beneath God's feet. The calf for Aaron was a symbol of a God you can't see. But what did the people make of that symbol? They made it God. They make it God. So what's the first definition of idolatry? The first definition of idolatry is when you make the symbol, you mistake the symbol for the thing that it's supposed to symbolize. The symbol itself becomes fetishized. The symbol itself becomes holy. There's something sacred about the symbol itself. They're worshiping the symbol as if it were the thing that it's supposed to point to. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, says what happens is it's like the hungry person who goes into the restaurant and tries to eat the menu. You forget that this is only a symbol of something. This isn't the thing. There's a second definition, though, here of idolatry, which is even deeper. Aaron is still a believer in the God. He knows who Adonai is, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, this God who brought us out of Egypt. But the people want what? They want something tangible. They want something visible. Why do they want something visible? Why does the child hold on to the banky, to the blanket after he grows up? Because they are afraid. And the idol becomes the projection of their fear. We human beings have a remarkable ability to project our fears onto somebody or something, right? You're living in a very complicated world with economic changes coming, economic upheavals coming. It's really hard to talk about the subtleties and nuances of world economy, of why jobs are moving from here to there in the world, or they're disappearing because there are machines that do them better. That's very complicated. It's so much easier to say Mexicans are coming over the border. That's why you're having a hard time finding a job. So build a wall. Mr. Trump. This year, there were 14,000 people the net Mexican immigration was a negative 14,000. There were 14,000 fewer Mexicans who came in the country than left the country. If you build a wall, you'll trap them here. Pardon me. But you see, If you're a Midwestern factory worker who's been making 28 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour, and suddenly you're told, we found a machine that does the job better, or we outsourced the job to India, you're pretty angry today. And who's going to explain to you global economics? So you project. But the problem is that the more you project your fear and your rage and your pain onto things and onto people, that becomes very destructive because you'll never deal with the problem. So if he says to them, this is only a place to worship God, but they think it's God. They think it's God, right? Tomorrow shall be a festival, Lord. Early the next day, the people brought sacrifices of well-being. They created a holiday. And they sat down to eat and drink, and they rose up to dance. Dancing. That's an interesting... We'll come back to dancing in just a minute, because that's wonderful. All right. Now, you see the space here? Now in the movies we say, meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, what's happening at the top of the mountain? Down below, if you're Cecil B. DeMille, down below you have all this festival. Eating, drinking, dancing, carousing, God knows what. Right? God knows what. It's wonderful. It's great cinema. What's going on top of the mountain? Moses is communing with God. Moses is doing what the people are supposed to be doing, communing with God. He's communing with God, and he's absolutely oblivious to what's going on down below, right? Then the Lord spoke to Moses, hurry down, for your people you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. Don't turn the page yet. Anyone ever take their child on a car trip? You will have this experience. And in the middle of the car trip, the kid starts vomiting all over the back seat of the car. And it's a holy, horrible mess. And your spouse turns to you and says, your kid just vomited in your car. You ever have that experience? Remember Moses? Did Moses want this job? 5 times Moses said to God on Mount Sinai, this job. I like sheep. I don't like Jews. Sheep do what you tell them to do. Sheep go where you tell them to go. Sheep don't project their fears and prejudices onto candidates. I want sheep. And God, 5 times, God says, go. So Moses finally says, I'm going to go. And now God turns to him and says, hurry down for what? Your people, whom you brought out of Egypt. Which is funny because that's what the people said, right? That Moses brought them out of Egypt. Your people who you brought out of Egypt have acted basely. And the answer here is there's a great joke. You're like, what do you mean you, Kimosabi? Like, what? Hello? Right? They have quick to turn aside from the way that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten calf, bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, this is your God. This is your God. Whom brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, God just loses his temper here. God just loses it. And here's why I want to stop a second. I told you this before, but here's where you get the meat of this. There are 2 voices in the Bible about how the world changes. One is the voice of idealistic revolution. The great, beautiful voice of the idealistic revolutionary. Right? And she believes that it's just going to take one zetz, one great push, and the world changes. People change. People will see what's in their best interest. They'll see the truth. They'll see justice, and they will become the people we want them to become, and the world will be what we want it to be, and it will all be perfect. There is this voice of true idealism, and idealism is hard to come by in a cynical world, so don't make fun of it. It's hard to come by in a cynical world. It's a beautiful thing to believe you can actually change things. It's in your reach. It's within your grasp to change the world. And then there's this other voice. There's this other voice which says, it would be beautiful if that were true, but people don't change that way. They just don't change that way. It takes a lot more, right? Who's a therapist? Where's Ronnie? Ronnie here? Ron Ryder still here? He was out. If you're a therapist, like what does the therapist do? when he's trying to get the patient to see the world through different eyes and construct a new narrative, and the patient won't let go of their old narrative. I mean, I've had cases where I sat with people for hours and hours trying to help them see why their children behave the way they do. Adult children, or why their parents behave the way they do. And after working through it, the person said, yeah, they should still be more respectful. Like right back to square one. It's the resistance to change. The resistance to change, right? My brother's a psychologist, and one of his early pieces of research was on diets. People who lose a lot of weight. What percentage of them ever keep it off? Yeah, like 1%, right. 99% of people who lose a lot of weight put it on within a year or two. Why? Because you revert back to the patterns that are familiar to you. So here is God. And what does God want? A holy people. Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. I want a holy people. I'm going to give you law. I'm going to give you a pathway to become a holy people. And the people say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then give them 40 days without a miracle. 40 days without snakes and sticks and species that split and bushes burning. 40 days. All it takes is 40 days, and what happens? Back to eating waffles and fudge. Right? 40 days you fit into your jeans, and then bam, back to your waffles and fudge. It's like, why would you do that? And he's so angry. This is the reason why the Bible sets up the dialogue. Because what happens to the idealist when he becomes disillusioned? Listen to the next line. The Lord said, I see this is a stiff-necked people. Let me be that my anger may blaze forth against them, and I will destroy them. The idealist, when he becomes disillusioned, wants to kill them all. Damn it. Why can't they see the truth? How many people did Mao kill? How many people did Stalin kill? A revolutionary who believes in the ideals of revolution and then is disillusioned, disappointed, he just wants to kill the sons of bitches. Right? Just so disillusioned. Right? Let me kill them all. I mean, what is God? God's going to do genocide. God's going to destroy a people. You just took them out of you. I'll set the thing. It'll get cold in here, though. You like cold? All right, if you like cold, you'll get cold. There you go. Don't complain to me when it's cold. It's going to get really cold. I'm going to change the name of the shul to the House of Menopause. So, all right, you ready? You have this inability to grow. They're a stiff-necked people. They're rigid. They're a stiff-necked people. They don't want to grow. They're a stiff-necked people. So I'm going to destroy them all. And now Moses puts Moses in a very interesting place. Look at the phrase again, because the Torah is so subtle in the way that it set it up. What God should have said was, this is a stiff-necked people. I'm going to destroy them. It's not what he says. Look at it, what it says. I see this as a stiff-necked people. In Hebrew, it's hanichali. Let me be. Hanichali. If it please, with your permission, if it pleases you. In court, you say, if it pleases the court, right? That's how you introduce yourself to a judge, right? If it pleases the court, with the permission of the court. Birshut Rabotai, you say when you bench Birkat HaMazon. Hanichali, which means literally, let me go. So the Midrash has this beautiful image. Hanichali means let me go. So the Midrash is that at this point, Moses grabs God's robe, very anthropomorphic, and holds on. He says, no, you can't do that. God says, let me go. I'm going to do it. I'm going to kill the son of a bitch. Right? No. It's like two parents with one teenager, right? God help that kid if you both get angry on the same night, right? But let me go, right? Hanichali, right? And so Moses says, no. No. God, he implored him. Vayachel Moshe. Vayachel is an interesting word. Vayachel Moshe. Vayachel means to put you. It's a plea and a cry, but it's a plea and a cry with your whole self. It's not just like a superficial prayer. He threw himself at God. Imagine a man pleading for the life of his families. He threw himself on the floor. Vayachel Moshe. Moshe begins to plead for his people. You can't do that, he says. Let not your anger blaze, O Lord, against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent he delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. You did all this in order to make a name for yourself in the world. You're going to blow it now? You're going to be like an Egyptian god who destroys more than he brings life? Is that who you turn from your blazing anger, renounce the plan to punish your people? Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember that they have goodness in them. They are born of good people. In there, somewhere, under all those layers of resistance and rigidity and rejection, there is still a soul. This people has a soul because you remember their parents. You swore to them, saying, I'll make of your offspring numerous as the stars of the heaven. You made a promise to their parents. You can't do this. What is he really saying to God? Remember who you are. You're not that kind of God. You're not that kind of God. You can't do this. You're not that kind of God. You got to be a different kind of God. Frankly, he's saying to God, you got to decide what kind of God you want to be. What kind of God do you want to be? It's going to get really cold in here in a minute. Do you want to be that kind of God? Vindictive, angry, destructive? What do you want to be, right? Right? I'll make of you. Remember, and God renounced the punishment. God renounces the punishment. Now God renounces what kind of God renounces a punishment? That we're going to come back to that question in a minute. What kind of anybody renounces a punishment? What kind of person changes their mind? What did we know about Pharaoh? Stubborn, hard-hearted. Once he made a decision, he stuck by it. Stuck by it. It was until the 10th.
No, he said he was going to let people go. Then the Torah said God made it hard.
Only the 5th time, the 6th time. The first 5 times he did it himself.
Yes.
The first 5 times he did it himself, right?
Yes.
There's a chilling, if you want to read something just utterly chilling, Robert McNamara did a memoir before he died. And he said in 1965, we knew that the Vietnam War was a lost cause. So the guy who's listening to this, who's interviewing him, is a journalist, says to him, you knew that the Vietnam War was a lost cause in 1960. Why didn't you stop it? He said, once you launch yourself, once you set a country on a course of policy, you can't turn back. He said, do you know how many people died in Vietnam? 50,000 Americans, 300,000-400,000 North Vietnamese. You knew it was futile? You couldn't go negotiate with Ho Chi Minh? He said, once you set a policy, these are hardened hearts. Now, so what kind of God gets this far and then stops and says, no, you're right? What kind of God stops and says, wrong policy? They're going to come back to that question in a minute. This is a different model of leadership. But just to finish the point, you have here in this discussion what? You have here in this discussion a confrontation between the idealist and the realist. And the realist says, I respect your idealism, I respect your vision, I respect your aspiration, I respect what you want to accomplish, but don't let it become destructive. Understand the human materials out of which you have to build this world. Give it time. But now now the roles are going to reverse, because you'll see this in a minute. The roles are going to, because now Moses has to confront the problem. So take a second, Murray.
Am I right in feeling that Moses is a better psychologist in seeing insight of God than God is in seeing inside of human nature? Was Moses as a candidate to God and reaching God?
Yeah. As a character, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it slightly differently. I'm looking at a piece of literature, And I think that the writer of this story is asking us to consider. The writer of the story knows people. But he also knows, he knows this on many levels. He knows the weaknesses of human beings, but he also knows idealists. You know idealists. You grew up with idealists. You are an idealist. I've known you for the last 30 years, I know you to be an idealist. But you've also, I know, have negotiated some really dicey moments, right, in your professional life. So you have a sense of realism too. And you also understand how hard it is for people to change course.
You're afraid of the future, you know the past.
Yeah, and you're afraid. And once you set a course, and a leader sets a course and gets in front of people and riles them up and sets a course, right? Read my lips, no new commandments, it's very hard. Very, very hard. That's what the Torah is dealing with. What does it take to change? What does it take?
I'm not aware of that.
What does it take to change? And in many ways, let's take a different metaphor. I'm using the idealist. Let's take a different metaphor. How about the artist? How about the artist that creates a piece of art and it just doesn't come out right? Right? I'm a writer. Mark's a writer. Bruce is a musician. You write a piece of music. You write a piece of music, and no matter how hard David's a musician, you write a piece of music, it's just not what it's supposed to be. Right? And then there's this argument inside of you, because you wrote it, so you love it. It's yours, it's like your child, right? Right? But on the other hand, it doesn't work. Or worse, the editor says to you, this stuff between pages 20 and 92, it's not your best work. It doesn't work. What?
How do we know that God wasn't testing Moses?
Well, testing's fine. I'm trying to get into the guts of this thing, Spear. You ever throw out a piece of music that you wrote?
Well, I've faced worse. I remember as a kid playing for a famous composer, and he said, "You'll never make it in this business, kid." But
that is worse than Moses.
What I'm saying is, it was negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
Do not destroy. So, I interpreted that. You know what? I'm gonna try hard.
All right. All right. Let's go down the mountain and see what happens. Mark, go ahead.
All right, look. The reason God changes, perhaps, is because of the exact words that Moses used.
Which ones?
Koch gadol yad chazakah.
Uh-huh.
So, if you look at the entire Tanakh, it is a tragedy.
Right.
And it ends with exile. So if you have to ask in a larger way, what is the source of the tragedy?
Uh-huh.
And the source of the tragedy was Moses' accurate statement to God, and I think really a brilliant idea of the two voices. But the two voices were, one really a pacifist religious voice, Moses' voice, and the other, God's idea, Moses' notion, the realist voice, that you need force to change things in the world. So God says, let the people go, you just tell them go.
Right.
And Moses is the one who says, they won't let you go except biyad chazakah, except with a strong hand.
Yeah.
And God shows Moses the futility of the yad chazakah, as the Buddha taught at the Arjuna and the Mula Madhyamaka Karakas, which I'm sure you're thinking of at this moment. The only way
I woke up this morning saying to myself.
The only way that wrath can be overcome is with non-wrath.
Yeah.
So there are two religious notions.
Yeah.
One, the biblical notion, which is a failure, that force can lead to liberation.
Right.
And the other voice, which was God's original voice, and the reason he changed, is that it is only truth.
Beautiful.
And non-wrath.
Right.
Compassion.
Right.
Goodness.
So there's a story. I want to give you the midrash, okay? Because we're storytellers together. There's a story which could be it's a Buddhist story, but it could be a Hasidic story. Right? The warlord goes to the master and says, "Teach me heaven and hell." Teach me heaven and hell. And the master looks at the warlord, this mighty, huge soldier, and this little teeny master. And the master says, "You want to know heaven and hell?" He says, you're a master. Teach me heaven and hell. The master says, okay. Listen, you piece of rubbish, you small-minded piece of crap. You have no legitimacy in the world. You are such a small, illegitimate piece of speck in the world. You are nothing but trash, and the world will wipe you away and never remember you. You have no significance whatsoever. You are worthless, less than a worm in the world. You are less than an insect in the world. You are nothing. And the warlord gets so angry. He says, how dare you speak to me like that? And he pulls out his sword, and he lifts his sword over the master, and the master says, that's hell. And the master stops with the sword over his head. The warlord stops with the sword over his head, ready to kill it. And the master says, that's heaven. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's a Buddhist Hasidic story. If you think that you're going to liberate a people by hail and frogs, and I got news for you. That's only a little piece of it.
Which meant that the people were right.
Yeah.
The people were right all along.
Which is? Right in what?
They only were taught to worship Pharaoh.
Right.
So Pharaoh changed his name
Right.
from Pharaoh to Adonai. Big deal.
No, to Moses. Pharaoh to Moses. Right.
But
Pharaoh to
they're
Moses.
still worshiping force.
They're worship, and they're projecting their fear
It
onto
is
somebody.
Sinai
Right.
that changes, which explains the May Meribah, why striking the rock before Sinai
It's okay.
was okay.
And now you got to stop. Right. That's it. That's exactly right. Beautiful. Sharon.
I also think there's a, building on what Mark said, is that the people are consistent, but God's consistent.
Yeah.
God's instinct is always to annihilate the people anytime they disobey.
Right.
And that, way back in Noah's time, after that, he promises, I will never annihilate the people again. But his instinct
Yeah.
is fury and annihilation, start again. And so I think you have this...
It's a parenting manual, by the way. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I think you have this foil
Emmett, you're
going on
next.
between, okay, here's God's natural nature,
Yeah.
and Moses is there to
Yeah.
remind him of what he could be. Just like
Good.
Moses is there for the people to
Good.
remind him what they could be.
You need somebody else.
You need somebody.
You need a chaver. You need a chavrusa. You need, or at least you need another voice in your own
And
conscience.
that, therefore, is Moses' greatness.
Right.
That makes him...
He plays God's conscience.
Right, and that's
So there's a
why
midrash.
God-
There's a midrash that on the day he died, on the day Moses dies, God buries him, and God's weeping and weeping, and the angels said, "What are you weeping? He was only a mortal." And he says to the angels, "Who's going to restrain me now?" That Moses played this role of God's conscience. And that's what he's burying, and that he's weeping. And then you know, this is such a sweet loss, the conscience. So let's see what happens. You ready? So Moses turned and went down the mountain bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, of the covenant. We're on verse 15, on 533. Inscribed on one side and on the other, and the tablets were God's work. And when Joshua is this suck-up who helps Moses, right? Hears the sound of the people and they're boisterous. He says there's a cry of war in the camp. He says, no, it's not the tune of triumph. It's the sound of defeat. It's the sound of song I hear. And when Moses came near the camp, don't turn the page, because I want you to just see one word here. This is such a great word. When Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing. Now, were I writing this, I would say, when he saw the calf is the betrayal. Why the dancing? What's wrong with dancing? What's wrong with dancing? Mixed dancing. Might lead to mixed dancing. What's wrong with dancing? What happens when you dance? It's complete abandonment. It's unbridled. It's the whole self. You can't dance with half yourself, right? You got to let it go. It's this letting go. And the dancing, which is a complete abandonment of themselves to the moment. It's an abandonment of themselves to the moment. So I want to suggest that there's another very subtle dialogue here. There's a subtle dialogue between time and timelessness, between wanting things as they are now, or worse, wanting things to go backwards, and knowing that life has to go forward, from being to becoming, from what it is now to what it ought to be. And this is a people that just doesn't want to become. Everything in the Torah is about becoming, about moving forward, about becoming the people we want to be, about shaping the world in the way it ought to be shaped. It's a process of becoming, but that takes a tremendous amount of faith and courage. And sometimes we lose that faith and courage, and the dance represents, I just want to stay right here. It's a circle dance. You're not going anywhere. I just want to stay right here. I don't want to move. And one of the things that Moses is grieving at this moment isn't only the betrayal of the calf, but it's the betrayal of the dream of becoming. It's a people that says, we're not going to change. We like the way we are. We're afraid to change. In fact, what we'd really like most of all is to go back to Egypt. He wants to move them toward freedom, and they want to go back to the security of slavery. And it just breaks his heart. And now Moses becomes the idealist. Moses becomes the idealist, and the narrator becomes the realist. And Moses sees the dancing and the calf. And what happens? He hurled the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Now you can ask many, does he drop them? Hurl them is the Hebrew. Hurl them is what the translator wrote here. Vayar et ha'egel vet ha'machlot. Vayachar af Moshe, got angry. Vayishlech, which means he lets them go. He sends them. Did he drop them? Did he throw them? Did he smash them? What? And how? Who are you to smash God's work? Who are you? So there's lots of ways to think about this, right? One way to think about it is, if you worship Pharaoh, and you worship Moses, and you worship the calf, and I bring you stone tablets written in God's hands, what are you going to do? You're going to worship the tablets. You're not going to read them, you're going to worship them. You're going to fetishize the religious object. I did something once which I shouldn't have done. I can confess to you because you're my friends and I have a contract now. I was carrying the Torah around the synagogue, and it was one of these mornings when people were very passionate and they were throwing themselves at the Torah. And I watched in one case that a little old lady was trying to reach the Torah to give it a kiss. Somebody knocked her out of the way to get to the Torah, and I got so angry. And they teach in rabbi school, in fact, I teach this in rabbi school, don't ever preach angry, because you'll say something you regret. But I was angry, and there was no one there to tell me what I know. And so I stood there and I said, how many of you in this room can read Hebrew? Oh, I saw half the hands went up. I said, okay, let me ask that question differently. How many of you can read Hebrew and understand what you're reading? Much fewer hands went up. How many of you can read the Torah in the Chumash and understand what you're reading? And there's only a handful of people. And I said, if you kiss the Torah, but you can't read the words, that's idolatry. What's holy here is not the object, not the cover, not the parchment, not the ink, not the wood. What's holy here is what it says. And if you haven't taken the time in your life to access what it says, what are you kissing it for? That's a shanda. That's idolatry. And Moses is afraid they're going to worship the object and not read the words. And the words say, you'll have no other gods before me. But they're going to make a god out of this object because, woo, it's holy. Woo, holy, holy, holy. Not so holy. What's holy is what it says. What's holy is what it does to you. What holy is the direction it moves you as a human being. What holy is the world that you create with it, not the thing. So he smashes them deliberately. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is a beautiful mystical interpretation, that when the words saw the people, what they were doing, the words say, we don't belong in this world. And the words went up to heaven. And Moses found himself holding two pieces of very heavy rock, and he dropped them. Now the idealist realizes that the vision isn't right for this world. The vision that he's bringing on these tablets doesn't fit this people. They're not ready for this vision. So he drops it. And he gets angry. And now you have this whole thing. He crushes up the calf. He makes him drink it. My mother did that to us once, you know. We were wasting some food, so she made us drink the food. You do this to kids once in a while, right? And what happens here, just to finish, Billy, did you want to say something? I cut you off.
Well, I was wondering.
Go ahead.
I thought, when these people diminish God's vision of their priestly mission in the world,
Right.
that they are, they can be holy, but only to a lesser degree than
They're afraid.
before.
They're terrified. They're terrified. They're afraid. People are afraid. People are afraid. It's easy to become afraid. The world's changing around you. You're afraid. You don't understand how it works, so you're afraid. And somebody shows up and says, trust me, I'll make it better for you. Don't ask me how. Trust me, I'll make it better for you. Or I'll build you a calf, it'll make it better for you. Or I'll...
Disappointment of
It's that
them
fear.
not reaching their potential.
It's that fear. No, it's not that. It's their fear, Bill. It's their fear. They've lost that sense of potential. All they want to do is eat. They're afraid. They're afraid there's no dinner on the table tomorrow. They're afraid. This is a story about how fear destroys human dreams. Now, if you're an idealist, you got to know that. If you're an idealist, you got to know what you're dealing with, says the Torah. Don't lose your idealism. Don't lose your aspiration. Don't lose the vision. But don't become disillusioned. Because you know what? It takes a long, long time. Right? If you're a therapist, you're a teacher, an artist, a dreamer, don't lose your idealism. Now watch what happens next. Ronnie, you're going to get your question, then I'm going to get back to the text. Because I got to find out what happens next.
When God is acting like a parent.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, a bad one too. Yeah.
The people has aspirations for the people, but they don't want to cooperate.
Every parent has a dream. There's a wonderful story. When I was back in graduate school, we read this wonderful book that says that even before you conceive the child, you already have its life planned out. And certainly when it's in utero, you have the whole life, you know what your kid's going to be. And parenting is the drama of the dialectic, the dialogue between the parental dream of the kid and the kid's reality. Now you have to have both. A parent who doesn't dream of their child, doesn't tell their child how much they can aspire to in the world, doesn't give their child, doesn't make sacrifices for their child. That's what, you make sacrifices because I want my kid to be that kid. And the kid has to say, Dad, I love you, but I'm going to be an artist. I know you want me to come in the plumbing business, but I'm going to be an artist, right? And the father says, but you'll be such a great plumber. And you say, Dad, I'd rather be a lousy painter than a great plumber, right? That's the great debate between the kid and the parent, and that's the dialogue, and that's what's going on here. But here it's not so benign because it's the people stuck, and God wants to move them, and they're stuck. How do you move people who are stuck? It's hard. It's really hard. Let's take a look. There's one more thing that happens, which is great. So he comes down. He confronts Aaron. We're not going to have time for that today. Look at verse 30, the next day, page 535. The next day Moses said to the people, you've been guilty of a great sin. I'll go up and see what we can do. And Moses went back, right? And he stands in front of God, and he says, alas, this people is guilty of a great sin in making for themselves a god of gold. If you will forgive their sin, well and good, but if not, erase me from the record of which you've written. What does Moses say? Kill me. Either you forgive this people or you kill me right here. Whew. That's like laying it on the line, right? You see what role he plays now? He's also an idealist, but he stands between God and the people, right? And now God says, okay, tell you what, I'll forgive you. I'm going to hold responsible those responsible. Look at verse 30, chapter 30. Set out from here, you and the people that you brought up from the land of Egypt. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive you out. Drive out the people. I'm not going with you anymore. Then look down. Look at verse 7. Now Moses would take the tent. That's the tent of meeting where he meets God. And pitch it outside the camp. Moses is so angry. What does he do?
Takes his toys.
You ever get so angry at your kids that you say, I'm leaving the house? Just, you guys, you want to act that way? Act that way. I'm going. Right? I won't live with you guys, not like this. I'm leaving. Relationships have these moments, right? Right? And it was called the tent of meeting. That's ironic, right? Because he's out of the camp, right? And it was outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the camp, the people went out, right? And they saw the pillar of cloud. So now Moses is outside the camp. God won't go with them. The whole thing is messed up. The whole relationship, the love there's been a betrayal of love. Been a betrayal. Rabbis deal with this all the time. Counselors do. There's been infidelity. What happens when there's an affair, when there's an infidelity? Can you ever forgive? Can you ever rebuild the family? Can you ever build a relationship? Very hard to do it. But there's an estrangement that's the response to infidelity. There's an estrangement. And in the midst of this estrangement, something just utterly remarkable, and I wish we had another hour. Maybe we'll do it next week, right? Look at verse 12 on page 538. Moses said to the Lord, "You say to me, lead this people forward, but you've not made known to me whom you're going to send. Further," he said, "you've said I've singled you out by name, and you have indeed gained my favor. Now, if I've gained your favor, let me know your ways that I may know you and continue in your favor. Consider that this people is with you, that this people is your people." And God said, "I'll go in the lead and I'll lighten your burden." So Moses says what? You love me, you love this people, you come home now. I know that they're terrible. I know that they betrayed you. I know that you're hurt. I know that your feelings are hurt. But we can't go forward. We can't be anything without you. So either you come home or we're not leaving this spot. And Daddy says, "Okay, I'll come home." I come home. And he says, "Unless you go to the lead, how will we know that you've forgiven us," right? And look at verse 17. And the text is a mess here. And the Lord said, "I will also do this thing you've asked me for. You truly gain my favor." Okay, I'll go with you. So Daddy says, "I'll come home." And now there's one more scene, which is just like mind-blowing. We'll do this next week because it's too good to let it here. Moses says to God, "Hareini et kvodecha. Hareini na et kvodecha." Show me your kavod. What is kavod? Yeah, but what is it here? How does he translate? Presence. What does he say to him? So Moses, mom and dad are trying to figure out what to do with these crazy kids, or a couple's trying to figure out how to solve the problem of an infidelity. They love each other, but they're so hurt. And finally there's a moment of reconciliation. And in that moment of reconciliation, one partner turns to the other and says, "Do you love me?" "Do I what?" "Do you love me?" "Do I love you?" Right? With our slaves and the trouble, and there's trouble in the desert. You're upset, you're worn out, go inside, go lie down, maybe it's indigestion. God, I'm asking you a question. Who are you? I mean, Moses has been asking this in the beginning, right? Remember the beginning when they meet at the burning bush? He says, "What's your name?" Now he asks them again, "Who are you? Who are you? What kind of God are you? What does it mean to be God in this world? Who are you?" And God says, "I can't tell you." It's so interesting. What does he say to him? He says, "Look, I'll make my goodness pass before you, and I'll proclaim my name, but you cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live." And then he gives him this really weird formula on page 540. "There's a place near me, station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I'll put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I've passed by, and I'll take my hand away, and you'll see my back, my face you won't see." God playing peekaboo. Peek! Now, the story stops and starts. It's such a messy story. But it stops and starts, and it continues on page 541, verse 5. "So the Lord came down and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. Adonai, Adonai, Rahum, God compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness." We talked about the argument between the idealist and the realist. You talk about the argument between the timelessness of the dance and the impulse to move forward. Here's a third argument. The pagan idea that you can know a God, that you can see a God, that you can confront a God. When he says, show me your kvodaga, he says, I want to know your essence. I want to know what you are. And what does God say to him? Here's a new idea. This is a seam line between two ideas of God. There's a new idea of God. What I am is irrelevant. How I behave in the world is relevant. My nature is irrelevant. What's relevant is what you need to know from me about how you need to be. What are these qualities? El rachum vechanun, compassion, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness. What are these qualities? When you let go of your hurt, of your disappointment, when you let go of the me, and you become loving, and you become giving, and you become generous, you become godly. God says to him, you don't need to know me. That's not how we operate in the world. I'm not that kind of God. You don't need to know that. What you need to know is how you need to be in order to be a godly person, to live the godly life. So you're not going to see my face, which means you're not going to see my essence. You're going to see what together we can do in the world. You're going to see what we can bring to the world. You can see the becoming, not the being. You can see what we can bring to the world. And for Moses, that's satisfying. For Moses, that's a satisfying answer. Question is it satisfying for us? Right? Here you have in this Torah portion all of this stuff. It's such a remarkably complicated and nuanced thing. So take a look at it this morning because it's just too good to stop with. And next week we'll take another look as well. Have a good Shabbos. Oh, wait, Sally, why was Ki Tissa stuck in here? Why was Ki Tissa stuck in here? Look where it is. Truma Tetzaveh Vayakil Pekude is all about the creation of the first religious institution, the first set of religious symbols, the first set of holy objects. And what does the Torah want to tell you? They are not holy in themselves. They are not sacred in themselves. They are not valuable in themselves. They are only valuable so long as what? They make you a holy person. They're only valuable for their effect on human beings. But the moment you turn the focus toward that object and you worship that object, instead of worshiping the qualities that that object is meant to bring to you, you have violated the holiness altogether. It is the greatest warning against the idolatrization of that which we hold as sanctified. Anything can become an idol. Anything can be a statue, a tree, yes, but also a Sefer Torah, a synagogue, a religion. When it becomes a projection of your rage and your fear, a presidential candidate. When it becomes a projection of your fear and your rage, instead of an instrument to make you a godly person. And so the great realists who edit the Bible put it in here and says, don't forget who you are. Thanks very much.